Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Global History. So what we're going to do today is we're going to summarize some of the key concepts that will finish us off for Chapter 7. And let me first bring you back a little bit just to summarize the last class's information. We talked about the rise of the Han Dynasty, specifically when it comes to the overthrowing of the Qin Dynasty. Remember, the Qin Dynasty started out with using a lot of legalistic tactics. Remember, very harsh rule over their people. Okay, and this was a pretty big deal because it made the peasants want to revolt, and they went into a full-on civil war. And the two members that we talked about that were crucial to the Civil War were going to be Zhang Yu and Liu Bang. Now, Liu Bang was Zhang Yu's second in command. He turns against them, and they go into a similar battle to the death to see who's going to rule the throne, and Liu Bang is victorious. Now, Liu Bang is going to jumpstart the Han Dynasty, which is considered one of the greatest dynasties in China's history. And he implements using Confucianism and tries to do the opposite of what the Qin Dynasty did before him. Now, Liu Bang does a pretty good job of ruling, but when he passes on, his son was way too young to rule. So Empress Liu basically uses this opportunity to kind of rule China in her own way. And every time she basically outlived her son, and every time they tried to decide a new leader, she would appoint children to be the new emperor so that she can keep her power. But when she passes away, basically China has to go and find who's going to be the next ruler, and this was a very political battle. Now, the person who ends up gaining this title is Liu Bang's grandson, Wu Di. Okay? Now, Wu Di does a very good job as the ruler. First, he defeats a Mongol tribe northwest of them and expands their territory, which is very important because now they'll have access to places like Manchuria, Korea, and Vietnam. And Wu Di is most known for using his power to create a very organized government. Okay, so his bureaucracy was a very well oiled machine, and he implements the policy of basically having people work in government for at least a year or work in the military for a year, which allows them to basically use this large labor force to create a lot of things that are going to be helping the general public. But the most important thing you need to remember about Wu Di is he implements a thing called the civil service exam. And this is basically a test to see whether who is educated and who is the right person to take a government position. Right, and this basically the impact of this is that they will have a more stable government because it's going to be filled with people that actually know what they're doing. So they kind of jump now into new information. Okay, and the Han Dynasty is a golden age in where basically there's a lot of new innovations, a lot of new technology, prosperity that's going to take place, and probably the most important thing that's going to be shown here is how the central government is going to take complete control over society. Now, first let's talk about the technology that's being developed. Paper is going to be a revolutionary invention, okay? And as much as we try to remember, back in the before time when we, instead of using computers all the time, we had to write things down on paper. And the reason why paper is important is because it allows books to be created very cheaply, right? Which means that when books are cheap to buy, more people have access to books, which means that more people have access to knowledge. People start to learn more things more than ever before. And they become more educated. They become become smarter, so that they don't just do one thing for the rest of their lives. They aren't just farmers forever. They can actually do more than one thing. On top of that, the government itself started to transition to using paper instead of the previous material that they had used before. And this was actually a lot cheaper, helped them save money, and allowed them to use for record keeping and writing down history. The other invention that we're going to talk about is the collar harness, and you can see it right here on the screen. Now, the collar harness is important because it is a very revolutionary tool for farming. It allows China to be able to farm a lot easier, and this allows for more produce to be made to help these increasing populations. Now, at the same time as farming starts to get better, there actually is starting to develop a manufacturing or commerce section of China. Now, manufacturing, I don't mean like factories, but basically manufacturing is anything that is man-made is a manufacturing product. Okay, and these things start to develop where in certain industries, these things called monopolies. Right, a monopoly basically is when a group or individual controls all production of a certain good. Right, so for instance, if you're looking at in U.S. history. They used to have monopolies of steel and railroads, right? Like that's when, back when the United States didn't have a lot of regulation on companies. If you're looking at an example of today, and I use this in class, let's just say if you're a gamer, there's 3 major gaming companies right now, okay? Maybe we'll do it this way. Actually, we'll do food. It'll be a little easier. So we have McDonald's, we have Burger King, and we have Wendy's, okay? Those are the 3 food companies, big food burger companies. If let's just say that McDonald's becomes so popular that it ends up buying Burger King, okay? And now these 2 are one company and Wendy's is by itself. And then McDonald's ends up buying out Wendy's as well. So now they have 3 companies that are controlled by one entity. So since there's no competition anymore, basically the prices of goods can now increase quite a lot. All right, and this is going to be a big problem because now this is going to hurt the consumer. So when you take a look at what happens in China, the government actually itself establishes these monopolies to control over certain industries. And the reason why the government does this is because they're pals with some of the leaders of these groups. So there's a monopoly for salt, a monopoly for iron, a monopoly for coins, a monopoly of alcohol, a monopoly of paper, and then there ends up becoming a monopoly on silk. Okay? And this is important because now the consumers, the little guy, is going to suffer tremendously from this issue, and this is going to be a big problem down the line. Now, other aspects of the Han Dynasty are going to be the assimilation of new groups. Now, assimilation basically is a tactic where all the people you conquered, you're trying to integrate them or combine them into your culture. Okay, so in China, when they expanded their territory into new areas, they forced these new areas, like in places like Korea and Vietnam, to become like China and take in Chinese culture. So they're no longer Korea culture, no more Vietnam culture, they are Chinese culture. All right. So they sent in farmers to colonize these areas and also set up schools to teach Confucianism as a way to kind of assimilate these groups into Chinese society. On top of that, they started to write their own history books to try to use something to kind of say, this is how we started, this is where we're going, and this was an easy way for them to kind of unify everyone behind one message. At the same time as all this is going on, we look at how women's roles are changing in society. Well, basically there's 2 schools of thought. All right, when you are a lower class or a peasant family, women were crucial to helping the farm grow and also crucial to educating their kids on the ideals of Confucianism and making sure they are devout to their families, okay? And in upper class women, they actually had different lives. They were educated. In some cases, they ran shops. They practiced medicine. But in all, in Chinese society, they were still subverted to the man. And because in Confucian teachings, basically, the woman is beneath the male when it comes to that relationship. Now, this is going to be probably the most important thing that we'll talk about. And the Han Dynasty was successful for some time. However, the differences between the rich and the poor really start to get out of hand, okay? And it caused a lot of issues. So I'll explain to you how this even happens. First off, the monopolies were controlled by the rich. So the consumer or the little groups of people, the lower class people, were getting screwed when it comes to prices on a lot of these goods, specifically on manufactured goods. But at the same time, when you're looking at how land was distributed back then, let's think of it this way. Let's just say there's a small-time farm, and it's represented by this square, and then here's a small-time farm versus a large-sided farm, okay? Now, back then, a patriarch who was like the father, let's just say he has like 4 sons. When the father passes away, the land is divided equally amongst the sons. So this one family has 4 sons divided equally amongst each of them. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. The same thing could be said about these large farms. All right, let's just say there's 4 sons for this large farm. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? But let's just say then, each of these sons has kids. So I'll erase the number here. Okay, so let's just say the first son doesn't have a kid. The second son has 4 kids. Third son has 2 kids. And the fourth son has 3 kids. Okay? So now this land is distributed even smaller. And then you look on the right side, let's just say it's kind of like the same thing, right? Each of these territories is still bigger than any one territory of this small time farm, okay? So that's the way in which it's different when land distribution. But on top of that, large time farmers had a connection with the government and also with the monopolies. So the large landowners didn't have to pay taxes. So let's go look at a list of some of the reasons why the poor were kind of really upset about this whole thing. Firstly, the land distribution is one, right? So I'll kind of mark it down here for you. Land distribution is one, okay? Second one, rich didn't have to pay taxes. That's bad. 3, monopolies. Monopolies hurt the small-time farmer. Okay? So all these things are adding into the fact that the small-time farmer, and then on top of that, the large landowners are the ones that were renting materials to these small-time farmers, and they had high interest rates for them. Okay? So then I'll just add that last one. High interest rates for loans. So land distribution, the rich didn't have to pay any taxes. There were monopolies, so the small-time farmers or the poor couldn't really pay cheaply on goods. And then whenever they asked for loans to pay for things, they had to pay a high interest rate for any sort of loan that was given to them. So all this stuff kind of leads into a lot of instability in government and leads to a lot of peasant rebellions, right? And through all this rebellions and all this unrest, a person comes forward to kind of overthrow the government, which is Wang Mang, who is a scholar and a member of the aristocracy or the rich community, overthrows the Han Dynasty in 9 AD and reestablishes stability. And he does this through a few different ways. First thing he does is he redistributes land to the poor. So now the poor people start to have more land than they did previously. Secondly, he reformed the money system. He basically changed the way that the money was counted, and so this ended up helping the poor end up having more money in their stockpile, which does help them. However, this angers the wealthy quite a lot. Okay? And he reforms the monopolies that were in place in China. So 3 of the big issues that were going on, he fixes. But with a lot of like hatred toward him from the rich, he gets assassinated in 23 AD. So he has a very short reign. Right? So 9 AD to 23 AD. But during that time, he does create stability. But the Han Dynasty lasts for another 200 years. But during that period, it ends up having somewhat decay and leads into a divided society, and it breaks up into 3 rival kingdoms. And that's where we're going to end for this PowerPoint. Now, your assignment is to do the Han Dynasty Gallery Walk. That will kind of summarize everything that we just talked about and show you the golden age and then what was developed during this time. But yeah, that's going to be the end of chapter 7. Okay, and so that's going to be it for us. All right. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm always available to help. Have a good one.